everyone, it's Sean at Cardiff Central Library Hub. I hope you're all well. I'm here to read chapter 9 of The Wizard in My Shed, written by Simon Farnaby, illustrated by Claire Powell, and read with the kind permission of Hodder Publishers. And in the last chapter, Merdyn finally realised that he had gone forward in time by quite a very long way, and it was a bit of a shock to him because he thought he was in purgatory. So he's finally realised that he's in the future and that everyone he knows from the Middle Ages will be dead from the Dark Ages, including his beloved Evanhart. So he was quite sad at the end of the last chapter, sitting in the garden talking to Rose. So let's find out what happens in chapter 9, which is called Returning These Pages to the Dark Ages. I just don't know what happened. Perhaps the pages did stick together. Jeremiah Jerobo was jabbering in front of King Paul like a naughty schoolboy before a headmaster. That's right. Gold star again to you. We're back in the Dark Ages, although the chapter heading rather gave the game away, so don't go feeling too clever. After Merdyn had been sucked into the rivers of time as opposed to those of purgatory, Evanhart began an inquest, and Jerobo was ordered to the great room of the king's castle to explain what had gone wrong. The king's home wasn't quite as grand a castle as you might have been seen on school outings. Those wouldn't be built until 1200 or so. Early castles were a crude mixture of stone and wood glued together with mud, hay and horse poo. Nevertheless, the great room was decorated with huge tapestries depicting the great battles that King Paul had won, and there were gold goblets and silver ornaments everywhere, so yeah, it still looked pretty great. The king was sitting on his throne, feeling increasingly exasperated. Evanhart was pacing the stone floor, shooting angry looks like daggers from her grey eyes at the flailing Jerobo. His coiffured golden hair, slicked into a point with candle wax, was annoying her more than ever. "Ah, yes, see," Jerobo said as he held up his black and gold spellbook. "The pages were stuck together. Look, wax, perchance. Thou knoweth how wax can be. It sticketh terribly." "Can't we just open the rivers of time again and bring him back?" asked the king. He had no real desire to bring Merdyn back, but he hated seeing his only daughter so upset. "The rivers of time are just that, father," said Evanhart. "They floweth through the centuries like water. There's no knowing where Merdyn did landeth. 100, 200 years from now? A millennia?" Evanhart gasped. What if he went backwards to the dangerous time of the saber-toothed tiger? "Well, lucky for him if he did," said Jerobo. The king and Evanhart glared at him. "I'm just saying, magnificent beast the saber-tooth," Jerobo spluttered on. "Until we did wipeth them out. We must remember to conserve our native species, do thou not thinketh?" "So thee see, father," Evanhart turned her back on the rambling wizard. "We could enter the rivers of time with magic. We have Jerobo's spellbook after all. But then where would we get out? It's like asking where a grain of sand did landeth on the shore. So let us put all our most wondrous scientists to this task instead. Perhaps they knoweth how to locate Merdyn." "Very well," said the king tiredly. "Thou will see to this, Jerobo." "With respect, sir, why me?" said Jerobo. "If 'twere up to me, I'd leave the skelpie limmer." This comes from the old Scots dialect. Skelpie means someone who deserves to be smacked, and limmer means thief or scoundrel. So if you ask me, Jerobo is talking more about himself than Merdyn, but that's just my opinion. Back to the story. "Wheresoever the rivers did spitteth him out. Evanhart appears to be the one who has the most affection for Merdyn. Let her find the vagabond." The king and Evanhart looked shocked. "I beg thy pardon, Jerobo," asked Evanhart. "What art thou insinuating?" "Yes, speak, Jerobo. What meaneth thee by affection?" said the king. "Oh, I'm sorry," Jerobo simpered. "I did assumeth that Evanhart had some sort of feelings for Merdyn. I did presumeth that is why she has refused to marry anyone else, including myself. The Lord knoweth I've asked her enough times. Then he actually thrust a hand to his forehead. If there had been soap operas in the Dark Ages, Jeremiah Jerobo would have been a great actor in one. "Oh, what am I saying? Hush thy mouth, Jerobo, hush now." The king looked sternly at the wizard, then at his daughter, whose cheeks had turned a deep shade of crimson. "Would thou excuse us, Jerobo?" said the king. "I wisheth an audience in private with my daughter." Jerebow bowed and turned on his heels and left the great room, a smirk playing across his thin lips. Once alone, the king turned to Evanhart, being careful to subtract the anger from his voice. "Is it true, Evanhart? Do thou have feelings for Merdyn the Wild?" "Oh, father," Evanhart replied, "thou do not knoweth him as I do." "The man is a criminal," the king bellowed angrily. "He was not always that way," cried Evanhart. "Before the war he was charming. He did maketh me laugh so. Lord knows we needeth to laugh in these dark times." Outside the great room, Jerebow had cast an eavesdropping spell, made from eavesdrops, a flower similar to snowdrops but more ear-shaped, and was listening through the large wooden door. "He most likely casteth a spell on thee," reasoned the king from within. "Did he giveth thee a love potion?" "No," cried Evanhart before smiling at a memory. "Although we did make a love potion together once. We made a sparrow fall in love with a hedgehog. 'Twas most amusing." "I findeth nothing amusing about this entire farrago," boomed the king. Farrago is a word still used a lot today, meaning a confused mixture of things. It originated from Latin words meaning mixed up grains. Loaf of farrago bread, anyone? Back to the story. "Thou thinkest I will ever let thee marry Merdyn the Wild? On my birthday last year he did turneth my wine into parsnip soup." Evanhart's smile dropped, but "Silence!" bellowed the king. "I've had enough of thy nonsense. Thou will do 2 things from this day forward. Number 1, thou must cease thy pleading for Merdyn's return. He is where he is, and let time have him. And number 2, thou will be married before this year is out." On the other side of the door, the eavesdropping Jerobow's ears were aflame. The king's demand left Evanhart speechless. She gathered her breath before asking, "Married? To whom, father?" "Whomsoever thou liketh," said the king. "There are plenty of eligible gentlemen around. How about Jerebow? I knoweth he can be a little annoying at times, but he's a loyal servant, and more importantly of noble blood. Why, his father owneth half of Wessex. Whereas Merdyn was an orphan. His parents could have been mumble-crusts for all I know." Behind the door, Jerebow did a little jig. "Marry Jerebow? Never!" thundered Evanhart. She clenched her fist so hard that the stone floor cracked beneath her. She was a witch, after all. "Thou wilt do as thy father ordereth you," thundered the king in response. "I've humoured thee for too long, daughter. A woman thy age should be married and having children. Thou must produce an heir to the throne. After all—" At this the king became quiet. "I will not live forever, and one day thou will be queen. Do thou not wanteth our family name to carry on, to ring throughout the ages?" Evanhart was angry at her father, but the thought of him dying one day made her pause. She paced up and down the room a few times in silence as he watched. "Very well, father. I'll marry Jerebow if it pleaseth thee," she said eventually to the kings, "and I'm sure your amazement." Behind the door, Jerebow was cock-a-hoop. He performed several fist pumps as if he was a footballer who'd just scored a goal. Even the cleaning lady who was sweeping up at the far end of the great room dropped her brush in astonishment. "However, I have one binding condition," Evanhart continued. "Which is," asked the king with trepidation, "that we find Merdyn the Wild and bring him safely home." Behind the door, Jerobow's face turned to thunder. "Why must that wretched Merdyn be a constant nail in my shoe?" he thought. Surely the king would not agree to this. The king, however, knew better than to argue with his daughter. It was a hard bargain, but it was a bargain all the same. When the king called him back into the room and told him of the pact that had been reached, of course, Jerebow pretended he was hearing it for the first time. "Thy highness, I would be honoured, nay flattered to join thy prestigious family," he said with all the oiliness of a snake dipped in oil. "Very well," said the king. "Here's thy royal engagement ring." And he handed over a gold ring set with a ruby, which Jerebow eagerly slid onto his finger. Evanhart shuddered, but she held her tongue. "Just one teeny tiny thing, sire, a mere shrew, if I may," Jeremiah piped smarmily. "What if we findeth Merdyn, but he be dead, not alive? Just for clarity's sake, thou understandest, after all, who's to say he didn't end up in the time of the great crocodiles?" I think he means dinosaurs, don't you? "Or in some future warring country." At this point, as a curious reader, you may be wondering why he would ask such a question, and you'd be right to wonder. What was Jeremiah Jeroboam up to? The king looked up to Evanhart for help. Dead or alive, I shall marry, Evanhart said, swallowing her pride. Just find him. That was precisely the answer Jeroboam wished to hear, and so, as he was wont to do, he started a speech. Dear King Paul, I cannot help but feel responsible for what has happened to Merdyn in the wild. Thou art totally responsible, Evanhart cut in. Well, yes, 'twas what I was saying, agreed Jeroboam. So given the fact that I do solemnly swear that if we tracketh Merdyn down, I shall personally go through the rivers of time to retrieve the poor fellow myself, where'er he may be. I am sure this can be done much quicker than thou imagines. In that case, declared the king, alert the finest scientists in the land. We have a warlock to find. Evanhart holds out hope for her rescue wish, but why does Jeroboam seem as slippery as a fish? So that's the end of chapter 9. So back in the Dark Ages, they're going to try and find a way to find Merdyn, but I don't think it's going to be that straightforward with Jeroboam involved, do you? Have a great week. See you next week for chapter 10. Take care. Bye-bye.